It was a warm and breezy Sunday afternoon, and two of the local gentlemen were having their usual discussion about the origins of mankind. Mr. Smith, an avid churchgoer, was a firm believer in the theory of creation, whilst Mr. Jones, a local educator, embraced the theory of evolution. It seemed that the two theories were incompatible, despite the argument each man put forth. It was at that point that a young man, keen on the conversation, stepped into the fray with his own version of events he referred to as the untold story of mankind. And when the young man finished, the two men were left speechless, and their thought process short-circuited. The landscape of their discussions would be forever altered. But what could this young man, barely old enough to shave, have said to these men with far more whiskers worth of life experience to melt their brains?
Well, Daddy-o, you're both kinda right, but kinda wrong too. So check it out. The only reason we are even having this conversation is because of the moon. Can you dig it? But not for our constant celestial companion, always looking over our shoulder. Life here on Earth would be very different. So lend me your ears and I'll share a little story my granddad told me shortly before he transitioned. So, once upon a time, God decided he was going to settle down and start a family. After all, he'd been bouncing around the universe, creating galaxies and planets and solar systems, and all sorts of super cool stuff, for like 13 billion years now. And the man was ready for a little break, you think? So one day, he packed up the old helium-3 powered God pod, and set out to find the perfect planet to raise a family. He went from one galaxy to the next, from one solar system to another, and from planet to planet. But they were all pretty much inhabitable, as most of the planets were either too big or too small, or too hot or too cold. Dude, there's even planets with atmospheres made of sulfur dioxide, and oceans made of liquid methane. That doesn't sound like a very kind planet, does it? And some planets even had gigantic, one-eyed cyclops that were very intimidating. Okay, so that part I just made up, but you never know. Now, where in the world was he going to find a planet suitable enough for starting a family? Then, God recalled a little galaxy he had created about 4 billion years ago. He remembered thinking that one of the solar systems within that galaxy had a certain unique element to it, and that if he were going to find the perfect planet, chances are it would be there. So he decided to pay a little visit to the Milky Way galaxy. And even traveling at 1,000,000 times the speed of light, which is seriously hauling ass, it took him a while to get there because of the vast distance involved. He pulled out a Google map of the Milky Way galaxy, and there it was. The solar system we call home. So after finally reaching his destination, he began to check out the planets in the neighborhood. He passed by the gas giant Neptune, and remarked, "Interesting. A planet that rains diamonds." As he passed by Jupiter, he noted how big and beautiful it was from afar, but alas, a bit too violent the closer he got. Saturn had its many rings, and was a sight to behold. Passing by Uranus, he thought to himself, I'm sensing some crude playground humor down the road some. Anyway, as he passed by Mars, he said, now we are getting somewhere. But after determining that Mars was not quite suitable, he rounded the cosmic corner and there it was. Earth. Just sitting there by its little old self. Looking like a big blue and white marble. So he got down off his cloud and made his way down to the Earth's surface. There, he encountered massive, uncontrolled oceans. A planet tilted on its axis. Winds of over 300 miles an hour, and a planet with no seasons. This will never do, he proclaimed. How will my people survive without stable shores? Will my people teach themselves how to raise livestock? or how to plant seeds and grow crops. Totally bummed out, God went back up into his cloud and pondered. This planet could be just right if the conditions were just a little bit better. But what could he do to transform this into a more perfect planet? It's not like he can just snap his fingers and make things happen, you know. The man doesn't work like that. Then, God had an idea. He busted out his iPad and started to crunch some numbers. After several moments, he said to himself, "Snap. This just might work. But I'll have to bend the laws of physics and probability just a little in order to pull this off." What God had in mind was to build an artificial satellite to act as a stabilizer in order to make conditions on Earth more favorable to his people. God also knew that Mother Nature, of whom he assigned to each promising planet, could be as cruel as she could be kind, and the disasters she created would become part of the daily struggles in the lives of his people. That's because God reigns over the heavens, but Mother Nature reigns over the earth. So he built the moon. He made it about a quarter the size and weight of the earth, covered it with a protective shell, and decorated it with craters. Then he sprinkled it with minerals like helium-3, and landscaped it with moon rocks and moon dust. But even God goofs up now and then, as he forgot to take into consideration the extreme gravitational force that the moon had on the Earth, and they almost collided. He slammed on the brakes.
Oops.
Way too heavy. That was because he made the moon's weight proportional to the Earth's, and in order for this experiment to work, he would not only have to lighten the load significantly, but he would still have to maintain its original circumference and diameter. His only option was to hollow out the moon. And in doing so, he ended up depositing even more minerals on the surface, like titanium and chromium, and even uranium-236 and neptunium-237. And get this, even water in crystal form. And in case you doubt my truthfulness, check this out. Craters on the moon only reach a certain depth, then flatten out, no matter what size they are. Now, shouldn't bigger meteorites leave deeper craters? Think about that. Then he did some precise calculations. I will make the distance from the moon to the Earth exactly 108 times the diameter of the moon. This way the sun's diameter is exactly 108 times that of Earth. And the distance from the sun to the Earth is exactly 108 times the diameter of the sun. That way we will have a near-perfect eclipse of the sun and the moon. And in the event that someone actually reaches the moon someday, let's just hope that they don't leave a bunch of trash, or crash booster rockets on its surface. Or heaven forbid, detonate a nuclear bomb. And scientists are going to be left scratching their heads, wondering where in the heck this moon came from. He then had to deal with Earth's unstable oceans. He needed to figure out a way to use the moon's gravity to reign in the mighty seas. This would take some doing, because he'd done similar things in other solar systems, but never with a moon as big and as close as this was. It was going to be tricky. And in order to pull this off, he needed to set the polar circumferences of the moon and the Earth, both at 27.3%. The moon orbits the Earth every 27.3 days. That creates what's called a tidal lock. Problem solved. The last thing he had to do was to place the moon into its proper orbit, 238,855 miles away, and at 5% above the Earth's equator so that different seasons would occur. God believed that these incremental changes could make the difference between survival or extinction for his people. And wouldn't you know it, the Earth transformed into a much more hospitable planet. He sat back and admired what he'd done. And when the time was right, he went searching for the prettiest gal he could find and start a family. He searched far and wide. And when he finally found her, the prettiest thing in the whole universe, it was love at first sight.
Whoa.
The rest is history.